Hey everyone, welcome to my interview series. Just 3 podcasts in. Still don't have a name for it, but that's okay. My name is Adam Ponophobia Cogswell, part of the Trinity Force Network. I am joined today by Ryan. Ryan is it fair to say you're a developer? I don't want to call you a video game developer, but is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. I honestly didn't have your role title like I have other people. So
okay, yeah. My official role was software engineer, and now my official role is senior programmer. So
there we go. See, programmer. Yeah. So you are a developer. You know what you're doing behind the scenes. This is actually a perfect podcast to follow up with the last one I did because we talked about dev QA and publisher QA. So it's great to kind of keep going down the rabbit hole and talk to somebody else who's actually behind the scenes and working on the product.
For sure.
So Ryan, tell me a little bit more about yourself, how you got started, if you can talk about what you currently do or any of the projects you've worked on in the past, if you can't talk about that specifically.
Yeah, I can't talk a ton about what I'm currently doing. I can touch on it a little bit. What people usually find really interesting, though, is my past and how I got into gaming. I've been told it's pretty much like a 1 in a million story. So I generally, like to tell it, and there's some other good segues with that. So I started out playing a game called Rift. It was a new MMO launched in February 2011, I believe. I think that was early access. I pretty much fell in love with that immediately. I loved it. I'm an MMO junkie. I can't get enough of MMOs. So I got huge into that. I started raiding. I started kind of working my way up into the game. I became a raider. Then I became a top world raider. And I slowly just did more and more. I started streaming. I started doing YouTube videos. I started making raid guides. I started, talking with developers for alpha testing and stuff. So, kind of to cut that a little short, I was about to graduate from college. This was 2014. And it might have been late 2013. So I basically sent a message to the developers that I already knew. I was like, hey, I'm graduating from college soon, degree in computer science, all this other stuff. And are you guys hiring? And he said, yeah, sure. Send me your resume. We'll see what they have to say. So I sent him my resume. I went through the whole interview process and ended up getting hired.
Wow. Okay. So that's the long and the short of it then, with your experience of trying games.
Yeah, that's definitely the short of it.
So let's really talk about this, because as you said, you were the world top, you were top in the world doing you were tanking for, I guess one of the world first guilds, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And really pouring your heart and soul into the game. So what really made you want to decide to develop, other than the fact that you were going for school for it? Is it just because you loved the game so much and you really wanted to give back to the community, or was it something else?
It was kind of a mix. So, growing up, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I got introduced to gaming at a really, really young age. So my dad got me interested in gaming probably 2-3 years old. I was playing Doom and Wolfenstein and Quake. That's just how I grew up. Mm-hmm. So kind of from an early age, I was like, maybe I can make games for a living. Maybe I can't. I don't really know what I want to do. So what I did after high school is I took a 2-year degree at a local community college for game development. And then after that, I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of fun. So then that's when I went into computer science. And really just the opportunity presented itself and I took it. There were other jobs I was applying for and I'm just like, man, that sounds so boring. I can't see myself doing this. And it was just, a really good opportunity, career-wise. And I tried to set myself up with it and, it ended up working.
So for those people out there, and again, I reiterate this with every show, is that the whole point of this is to educate and enlighten people out there that may not understand what it's like to be behind the scenes or be a video game developer or whatever it may be. So while you were working on your computer science degree, what kind of courses, programming specific courses, were you taking that you saw that translated into the real world?
Really not a ton. So not gaming wise specifically, especially for what I do. So a lot of the CS courses they make you take, some of the stuff is really useful. Here's intro to C++, here's advanced C++ with data structures. That stuff is pretty useful, but a lot of really, really advanced stuff I've literally never used. It just doesn't come into play in a lot of the aspects of development that I work on day to day. Maybe it does for some others, but for me personally, it doesn't.
I know that you've signed NDAs and whatnot, but is there a specific coding language, or is it a mix of a bunch of coding languages when it comes to programming these?
Yeah, so generally C++ and C# are the most common. C# is very common because Unity, Unity is pretty easy to pick up and develop with, and C++ is what runs Unreal Engine 4. So those are generally pretty good choices that a lot of companies have gone with. It's kind of just, quick startup time. They have a good foundation. There's, an engine there available if you want to use it.
So, okay, and that's helpful because I think that might help people have a better understanding of things that they need to really focus on because, C#.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you learn one, you can learn the rest. They're so close to the same. They all have their own nuances and things you have to learn and their own syntax, but that's stuff you're going to pick up over time. If you get the base down, you're generally going to be set. So, learn object-oriented programming, learn inheritance, learn classes, learn, basic data structures, and then those will all translate with you to pretty much all the other programming languages that you use.
So when you are developing for a game and you're putting tasks together, right? I'm assuming that you're kind of using some kind of workflow where you're given some kind of task to work on today, right? Like,
yes,
build. I guess I'll talk about. Can you talk a little more about that? Like what the workflow is like behind the scenes, what kind of tasks you're given. You can use generic examples if you need to.
I can go into specifics if you want. So. Yeah. This might be too much in detail. If it is, stop me. But back at Tryon, we use Jira, which is just a task management system to basically create tasks and track them and then assign them out to other people. So generally a day for me would be, okay, open up Jira, check what my assigned tasks are, look at their priority level, because you can sort them based on like, oh, this is super important, or oh, this is, a really low impact bug that isn't going to have a major effect if I don't fix it right away. So, based on that, I'll open up Jira, take a look, kind of pick and choose, what I might want to be working on. If I only have like an hour or two left in the day, I might pick something really short. If it's the beginning of a day, I might, start a really long task. So it really varies based on, what needs to be done, the priority of everything else for the most part.
Yeah, I talked about Jira and the agile work process actually in another podcast we did. And it sounds like a lot of video game developers are taking on agile, that style of workflow.
Yeah, and then there's, also some cases where, a designer comes up, he's like, hey, I need this really involved system to be, implemented into the game. Here's the design spec, go. Tell me if there's any questions. And, I might just spend a month, 2 months, 3 months just on that system, and that's all I do. So it can really vary from, day to day, week to week, month to month.
Gotcha. That's cool. And I'm assuming you're working side by side with the graphic artists and whatnot, right? To put a world together or to put assets together.
It depends on what I'm making. A lot of the systems I've made in the past haven't really required any UI. Those that have required UI, though, I generally do work very closely with the UI engineer. And the UI engineer is usually the one who worked with the art.
Okay. So how involved is something like coding for Rift or kind of an MMO, I should say?
Very. There is an absurd amount of shit you got to know and be careful of. Just in general, Rift started development. Don't quote me on this. I think like 2007, 2008 is around when it started development, and then it launched in 2011, and then I started in 2014. So right there, that's already like 6-7 years of code that I just had to learn and jump into. And, part of the thing is nobody knows all of the code anymore. It's just, some of it is lost, which really sucks. So a lot of the in-depth stuff that needs to be done is like, oh, the system broke. Nobody knows how this works anymore. You go learn this from scratch and fix it.
Oh, wow.
So there is a lot of that. And that will vary from studio to studio. How old is the game? How many people do you still have around working on that project? That kind of thing.
Right, and I'm assuming what's the code, the back end look like? How well is it organized? How well is it documented, etc.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just that's kind of like the question I've always had with these MMOs is, how involved is the system? Because everything has to go on in real time, and the code has to make up for that, right? Like I can't imagine what it's like behind the scene to be shooting fireballs and moving and everything.
It is a ton of code. Like it is. You cannot imagine the amount of code. Like I worked on Rift for 4.5 years. There's probably files I didn't even know existed.
Wow. And they were all, of course, moving some aspect of the game.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you look at our commerce manager file, which handles like all of our like real money transactions and buying and selling. Like that's a massive file with so much complicated stuff that not everyone knows because it's not something that really gets looked at every day.
Right.
So kind of just jumping into that is just like, oh, here's millions and millions of lines of code. So I mean, to get back to your original question, it's very, very involved.
Wow. And so do you know what like the server structures and stuff look like that for specifically for, I guess, Rift, since that's the one you worked on? I'm assuming you're looking at giant server farms as well now, right?
Kind of. So our servers actually were in Austin, and I was up in California by San Francisco. So we didn't actually like have our servers here. We had a network operations team that handled all of that. But in regards to like actually like utilizing the servers and sending messages, to the client from the server and to the server from the client, that was engineering's job to get all that, to work.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just curious if you had actually been able to tour or look at the facility.
No, I haven't. The closest I came to that is we had some like for our local servers, we would or not necessarily our local servers. Our local servers would just run on our machine, but like we had different branches for different, basically different. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Sorry.
You're fine.
We had different branches for basically the state of the game. So like we had a main branch which was like really, really early stuff, and then we had a test branch which could get pushed out to the public test server. Then we had like a stable branch which was like a week behind what our live servers had. So I've seen those servers because we hosted some of those in our office, but in our like actual live servers I hadn't seen those.
I think that's the next type. I think that's the next person I have to go find. I'm gonna have to go hunt somebody down that's actually worked as like a server admin for these type of things, because I'd be really interested in talking about some of that kind of stuff. I know I toured Riot Games years and years ago, and I remember seeing like their command center, right, with all their live stats on the screens and stuff, and it was really cool.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm really into server stuff. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I enjoyed looking at it too. I don't know if I can say any more about that, so I'm gonna zip it here. But it was just as cool to look at. They have all the live stats on the screen. You can look at network usage and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm a nerd when it comes to computers too. So I'll shut up before we get too far off topic.
No, it's fine. I mean, the closest we had to that was like a web diagnostics, where we could basically look at a web page that had all of the server information on it, so we could see like who was connected to the server, any server errors, a bunch of other information, like more info than you could even figure out what to do.
Sure. So I guess let's move back into Ryan the Raider rather than Ryan the developer, because I want to know. You had talked a bit about toxicity to me in a private chat, and I want to know about your journey from toxic raider to now video game developer, because I have to imagine as video game developer you can't have any kind of toxic relationship, especially in a professional work environment.
Oh yeah, of course. So yeah, that's always an interesting topic. So to step back, I was really toxic. Like I was a fucking asshole is the best way to put it. Like I had no regard for other people. I said exactly what was on my mind. I had no filter. I didn't care. And I don't know if it was lack of caring. I don't know if it was just lack of understanding, but there was something that just, I was really, really shitty to other people, and especially developers. And that really sucked. So I, definitely tried to learn from that, and try to kind of teach other people, the wrongdoings of their ways if I see that happening, just because, I know they might not be in the best place. I might, they might not even necessarily know what they're doing and how it affects other people, which I think was, probably closer to my case.
So what made you turn around from being toxic then?
I think being able to put real people to the names of developers, because before, I'd be on the forums and I would see a name, but I'd have no clue who they were, and my brain wouldn't associate that it was a real person. I don't ask me why. I have no idea why, but something in my brain was like, oh, I'm just gonna be a dick. And eventually I started getting to know these people, and I'm like, oh, I've been really, really bad to these people. These are actual people.
Right. And I know that's something that I've preached in the past on other podcasts that I've done, that you just have to remember there's other people on the other side of the microphone. And like you said, it's cool to hear somebody else say, I realized that on my own and I had to change my outlook.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of toxicity really comes from passion, which is really interesting because like I loved the game so much. So anytime a decision was made that I didn't like, I was really passionate about it and I took it personal. So I basically took that personal anger out on whoever was announcing it or the other developers, which is, obviously not a good outcome.
Oh, wow. I had never thought about it from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the toxicity really just comes from your most passionate players. At least,
kind of because that's a really insightful way to look at it. And,
yeah, I mean, I don't know how true that is in every case, but at least in my case and a lot of the cases I've personally seen, it really is just a thing of passion. Like, I love this game so much. How dare you change this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can definitely see that. Well, that's really interesting. People get so invested in something, and that makes a lot of sense the more I think about it, because people can get really invested in their rank in a game or whatever it may be. And that's where when you start,
or even their class. It's like, oh, why did you nerf this? This was good, or now I do 10% less DPS. Fuck you. Like it's really easy to get caught up in the moment of that kind of thing.
So moving in from that, having this enlightened moment where you realize you need to be nicer to people, how did that change? Were you rating at the time? I guess my very question, did that change your interaction with people that you're playing the game with as well?
Yeah, I was definitely nicer for sure. Like there wasn't like a single moment I can think of where everything just like clicked and I stopped being the way I was and was nicer, but it was definitely like a gradual change over time, and it eventually just turned into like my lifestyle. Like I just don't act like that anymore, and I don't have to stop myself from acting like that. Like I think beforehand it was like, oh, let me type this up, and then I'd like double check it to make sure I didn't say anything really, really bad. And now it's just like, I'm just not an asshole anymore.
That's awesome. I think a lot of other people can definitely, learn from that and kind of just, stop for a second before you press enter and think about what you're saying.
I mean, I definitely did that a lot. I'd make a forum post and I'd be like, okay, is this okay to post? Because, I'd gotten a lot of bans. I'd got a lot of infractions. So, that was part of it. I didn't want to get any more, but that was definitely part of it. So,
God, I don't think I could imagine being a world first raider and be getting bans and whatnot. And being that, I've been that person where you're that world first raider. Classic WoW was my drug at the time. And I could only imagine what it would have been like to my psyche had I been banned or anything, because I was so passionate about the game, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely got into some arguments. Like, I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I used to fish bot in Rift, and I got caught one day, and I don't know what went over my head, but for some reason I was rationalizing that it was okay, and I went off.
Oh wow! I think most of us have botted at some point in time. So, from my point of view, I'm just going to say that while you shouldn't have been fish botting, I understand why you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely ran, bots, like leveling bots. Again, my stuff was back in the day before anti-cheat and whatnot was around, so it was a little harder to be caught, but I get it. So, you reach out, you work as an employee, or, you pick up as an employee with Tryon Worlds. What's it like going from not having any experience at all to being tossed in front of this code dump and said, make it work?
Very stressful. It's it's just a really big learning experience, really. When I started, the first project I got put on, they threw me out like a week. Like a week after I started working there. They basically gave me a project that took me like 3 months, which was taking the entire code base of Rift, which ran in Visual Studio 2008, and converting all of it to Visual Studio 2013. So I had to make it compile under all the new stuff. I had to fix all the property sheets up. There was so much migration that had to be done, and different, data manipulation and all this stuff that I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And this wasn't even like programming. It was just like linking files together properly. And I mean, like that was the first thing I did. But I mean, I touched a lot of files then, and that actually gave me a really good foundation for what I was doing, because that took me 2-3 months, something like that, and I had to go fix all these different projects, mini projects, and files that just wouldn't compile, and it kind of got me a really good knowledge base for the foundation of the game. So that definitely helped out.
Did you have any kind of mentor when you were working with them?
Kind of. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, really, the mentor would really just be, the lead engineer. He would, help me out if I had any questions, which was pretty much daily. I'd go up to him and be like, hey, I'm having trouble with, such and such. Can you help me out? Or do you have any ideas? Can you double check my work? Stuff like that.
Gotcha. And I bring up the mentor because it seems to be a common theme that you become friends with the people you worked with. Did you find that was, a similar experience in Tryon?
Oh, yeah. I became very, very good friends. That was honestly the best part of being there, was just the people. Like, my coworkers were amazing. We played board games at lunch. We played board games after work. We, got lunch together. We went to each other's houses on weekends to play board games in some cases. We had parties occasionally. We would go to each other's houses for like Thanksgiving and 4th of July and all that stuff. So, it was a really good time and a lot of really, really great people.
Very cool. And it sounds like the community aspect of the video game development world is there. The other people I've talked to have all said the same thing. There's and everything.
I mean, a lot of the advice I got, like going through college and just starting out, was like, don't burn bridges, because pretty soon you're going to know people all over the world in different gaming studios. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And, I didn't burn any bridges or anything, but, 5 years later, it's like, oh, I really do know people all across the world now in different gaming studios.
Sure. And hopefully you can leverage that, as you move through your career as well.
For sure. It's definitely useful to have.
With Tryon, it's specifically, since that's what we're going to talk about now, what's the campus like at those areas? Is it, I don't want to call it a college campus, but is it kind of like one of those type where you can come in when you want, leave when you want, as long as you're getting your work done? Do you have the break rooms, et cetera? Or is it more of like an office cubicle type, setup?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for other studios because I have no idea, but at the very least for Tryon, we were in it was like a technology center essentially. So there were like a bunch of other office buildings, and we just had an office building there. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, come and go as you leave, more or less, it was kind of just, as long as you're in by 10 o'clock and you don't leave before 5 o'clock and you get your work done, they didn't really care. Oh, cool. Just, work 40 hours, be here at 10, be here at 5, you're good, is pretty much what it was.
Okay. I think a lot more people, not just video game studios, I see it a lot in other businesses too. Like the flex time thing is really taken off where.
Oh yeah, it's really great.
Yeah. I personally have that. I love it. We have our core hours. It sounds like you guys did too, 10 to 5. As long as you're there, no one cares what you do.
And even then, that's flexible. It's like, oh, I have a doctor's appointment. I'll be in at 11. No one cares. Just, you have a doctor's appointment. Just go. Be an adult.
Right.
Pretty much, they pretty much just hold you accountable to do your work.
Okay, so you work for Big Red Button Entertainment right now, correct? Okay. Do you find it similar between the two game studios? And I guess those are the only two game studios you've worked for, right? Tryon and
it's actually the only two real jobs I've had out of college.
Okay. So with Big Red Button, do you find this the same? Like you're a community, you have the flex time, you're able to work, and I know what I was going to get to the question next, so this is going to lead me to that.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely very similar for sure. It's a much smaller studio, so there's, I'd say in some ways, we are closer because we work together a little bit more. In regards to like the Rift team, I'd say it was pretty similar to, how the Rift team and I were in regards to like how well we knew each other and got along and the camaraderie and stuff like that.
So this is the question that I was trying to rack my brain for. I read a lot of stuff on Twitter from time to time about what people assume the game industry is like, or there's like, media reports like Kotaku or Polygon or whatever, specifically in regards to crunch time or, making things work. Is that, I guess it's a little different because it's an MMO and there's not really a crunch time, but maybe with your new company do you find that there's any truth to that with what you've worked? Like you're being forced to work extra hours, you're being forced to work extra hard, etc.
I've been very, very fortunate, and I've actually not experienced crunch at all in either of the studios. Some of the other developers on Rift, unfortunately, did have to work a lot of extra hours. So just because it's an MMO doesn't mean you're safe, because, there could be a big patch coming out, there could be an expansion coming out. So some people did have to work extra hours, and that really sucked. I was fortunate such that I didn't have to. Some days I did, or some days, be like, oh, I'm about to go home and the server just crashed. Go fix it. So, those days happen. I don't really consider that crunch. That's just part of the job, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. No, that's not. I don't believe that's crunch either, because I have the same thing. Excuse me. Where yeah, you are. You're told, hey, such and such crashed at 7:00 at night. I got to spend 15 minutes and fix it while I'm at home.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I just need to find to get a real answer to that question. So I've been asking everybody that. I need to find somebody who's worked on some kind of AAA game that has to be out the door. A Modern Warfare, a Doom, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to not have experienced that.
So how do you feel that your previous experience with Tryon and jumping in there, you worked for Tryon for 4 years. Do you feel all that experience really propelled you forward to work with Big Red Button?
Yeah, for sure. I learned a ton while I was there. I didn't. What's weird is I didn't really realize how much I had learned until I had started this job. I kind of took for granted a lot of the stuff I picked up along the way at Tryon, and I was like, oh, this is how I do things, whatever. I'll just go on my way and get this, finished and implemented or fixed or whatever the situation was. And then I get here and, I get tasked with stuff and I'm like, oh, wait. I know how to do this, or, I've done very similar things in the past, or, oh, this is how to architect out this data and how to structure everything. So, a lot of that can, carry over, even if you don't necessarily realize it at the time, which can be really nice.
Is there anything you would have done differently before, through the 4 years of Tryon and now moving to the Big Red Button?
I wish I would have looked into how some of the systems worked on a little bit of a lower level. I generally stuck to some of the higher end stuff, like the systems development, really, really high end stuff. But when it went down into like the details of like, why does this work? I never really looked into that. And I wish I did.
And okay, that's I like that take on that. Do you find that you play the games too still, like even after being a developer for Tryon, were you still going home and playing Rift and raiding and whatnot?
Yeah, I was actually still a world first raider as a developer, which was a very, very interesting situation.
You don't feel like that brought any kind of vitriol or anything toward you, did you? Because you're the world first raider, but you still work on the game, so some people might cry
from
foul.
The players, yes, there were a lot of people who cried foul. There were a lot of people who thought I was cheating, and in reality, I literally didn't even know how, my account didn't have privileges, and any of the accounts that I did that had privileges, everything I do is logged. Like, I'm not going to risk my job to cheat. Like, really, right. Guys? But then other people were like, oh, well, maybe he's looking at the scripting and he knows how these boss mechanics work. And I literally never learned. Like, even to this day, I still don't know how a lot of those scripting, how our internal scripting worked. Right, so there was no cheating going on there.
With the way that you explain it, with there being millions and millions and millions of lines of code, I can't imagine it's easy for you to walk in and go, okay, I know how this boss works. I'm going to get how many other players were there? 19 other players.
19. Yeah. So if I really studied it, I definitely could have learned it. I didn't. I didn't.
It's not like you have time, right? Either, because you have projects you need to work on. I would assume you don't really have time to sit down during the day and then try to study this brand new boss just so you could be a world first for.
Oh, for sure. That would have. Points. Yeah, that would have been something I would have done on my own, free time if I were to do such a thing.
Right.
But, I still never really learned how those bosses work. They were really crazy.
That's really cool. Did you get to ever work on? So speaking of bosses and stuff, did you ever get to work on any of the mechanics of some of the bosses or any of the new ones that came out? It sounds like you didn't.
No, I didn't.
Okay. When it comes to like an MMO, or I know Tryon can be a little different. Were you kind of broken up into different segments? Like you're working on world, you're working on bosses, you're working on characters, etc.
You mean in terms of like the designers or engineers?
I guess I'm confusing designers, engineers, and coders and developers, right?
So generally the designer will like spec out the boss. They'll figure out what the boss is going to do, what the mechanics are going to be, and then they're going to implement that and get all that scripting into the game using our editors. And then the engineers are basically the ones who have to make everything else behind the scenes work. So a designer might come up to an engineer and say, hey, I have a new boss that needs to do a 360 no scope and shoot you in the head.
Right.
And then it's the engineer's job to implement the 360 no scope. And then the designer will use that within the boss fight.
How many times did it happen where you wanted the 360 no scope and they couldn't give it to you?
I don't know. I kind of tried to stay out of like boss mechanic development. Partially just because, one, I'm admittedly not super creative, and I couldn't think of great ideas that would have been like really fun. And part of it is I think they didn't want to necessarily come to me because that would have, kind of been an unfair thing. Gotcha.
Were you like behind the scenes stuff? I know you did a lot of the coding and whatnot for it. In the development meetings and whatnot, did you have any role in any piece of the game or coming up with any of the mechanics or anything that happened? Like, was there a mark that you left on Rift?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of marks I left on Rift. One of the things, this isn't really, like anything a specific task was, but one thing we used to do for fun is we used to use some tech that I made to make ourselves PvP flagged against everyone, and then everyone could attack us, and then we would essentially turn ourselves into raid bosses and basically just become a player, or, a raid for other players in the open world, which is pretty cool. So I got kind of known for doing that, and a lot of the other developers did. But in regards to my actual work, some of the bigger stuff I did, definitely are still there to this day. I made a chat reporting system, and I think one reason they chose me for that is because I knew toxicity, I knew players, so I kind of knew what to expect and what to look for ahead of time. And that's actually the most favorite system I've ever worked on. Basically, there's a lot of database stuff going on behind the scenes. It can receive reports. It stores a bunch of data, and it actually goes out of its way and automatically muted people's accounts for periods of time, and then would email myself and production and customer service saying like, hey, this person got muted, here's a bunch of chat logs. So that that's pretty cool. And there's a lot of other major systems I've made that are still at the game and used every day.
Very cool. So a couple more questions, because I've only got a few left here. Is there, if there was a new developer that was coming in or somebody that really wanted to break into the industry, do you have any kind of advice for them? Since I know you didn't really come in organically, but still, you've been through the gambit for 4 or 5 years or more now.
Yeah, for new people, just getting yourself involved is great. An obvious foot in the door is what I did, and get really involved in your game. And, if they allow that kind of communication, or you actually have an open line to developers to give your personal feedback to, that's a great position to be in, for one. Otherwise, just, study, learn a language and learn an engine. Whether you want to pick up C++ and Unreal and make a game, whether you want to pick up C# and Unity, make a game, those are the two things I can recommend. But really just getting some kind of a portfolio and having something tangible you can give to somebody, because when you're coming straight out of college, most people might not have something. They don't really have a resume that game employees are going to care about. But if you go up to somebody who's hiring and say, hey, I made this game, go look at it, and they really like it, that gives you a major step up against the competition, and also just gives you, really good foundational knowledge of, what you should and shouldn't do in making a game, at least hopefully.
Okay, very cool. I guess my last question then is a sort of a personal question for you. I know you're currently developing for another studio. You've got some time under your belt. Do you feel... you sound passionate, right, about video games.
Very. That's literally my life.
Right. Do you see yourself continuing down doing video game design and whatnot for the rest of your career, or do you think you might branch out at some point?
That is very hard to say. I've actually given that a lot of thought over the past, even month. But even the past few years, I have. One thing to note is, for those of you who don't already know this, game developers get paid way less than normal tech jobs. If I were to leave game development and join a regular tech job, I'd probably get a huge pay raise, but I would probably hate it. And I don't want to hate my job. I want to come into work and say, okay, I love what I'm doing. I like this game. I like these people. Let's get this done, rather than, I'm coming into work, I don't have anything in common with my coworkers. I have to wear a button-up shirt every day or dress up every day to work. I have to be here exactly from like 8 to 5 or whatever the hell the hours are. I get a 60-minute lunch break, stuff like that. That's not a thing in games, at least in my experience. Right. So leaving the industry for me, while it would be more lucrative, I don't think I'd be happy.
Okay. And that's fine. Sometimes we just stay in areas because we're comfortable and happy, and that's all that matters, right? As long as we're doing something. And I'm envious of people that can go out there and do this and do the type of work you do, because I don't personally, I don't think I could do it. But even though I am passionate about video games, so kudos to you for being able to stick with it and continue to make awesome games for us to play.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not all good. It has its downsides. Part of that, goes back to the toxicities. I have to deal with a bunch of little assholes who used to be like me. I have to deal with, bomb threats, or I have to deal with people saying they want to kill me and my family, or I have to deal with just general negativity that I don't want to be a part of and have in my daily life that I'm pretty much forced to look at. Mm-hmm. So, that's definitely one of the negatives.
Well, I think that pretty much ends it here. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts, final words, anything you want anybody else to know about, video game industry or your time working?
No, I mean, not unless you have anything else in particular. I feel kind of awkward leaving it on such a sad moment like that, though.
Oh, no, but it's fine. We get it. I mean, we've gone through the gamut of emotions with this podcast. I think I'm going to keep hounding this home with every show that I do and host, is that, these are real people. He's a real person. He's doing his best. He's doing it because he loves it. Stop. There's no reason to act the way that we do toward the developers. There's no reason to shun them off Reddit and whatnot. They just want to help.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, part of the issue is people need to learn how to give constructive feedback. There's a big difference where, say you don't like this mechanic. There's a really big difference when you go on Reddit or go on the forums and say, oh, fuck you, this mechanic is terrible. How dare you fucking do this? I hope you all die and burn in hell, which I've seen a ton, or you can say, I don't like this mechanic. I don't think it is a fun mechanic for this reason, I don't enjoy doing whatever the mechanic is for whatever reason, and then say I would prefer it if it worked like this, or here's some other ideas that you can replace it with. One is going to get you ignored and probably banned, and the other is going to put you in good eyes of the developer.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I've always tried to toe the line with. I generally try not to get out there and go, oh, this is a piece of shit, I fucking hate it, it's garbage, I'm not gonna ever I don't ever say, I don't know yourself, it's just this, I hate this mechanic.
Yeah, it's easy to do when you're passionate about something. Is just as I said, it's really easy to get caught up in the moment, but you just have to not. That's really the best thing I can say, and that is just think.
So okay, so that I guess here brings up another question. If somebody was out there and you're working on a game, and let's say they don't like the way that a character shoots a fireball, right? It's not fun, and they call it a garbage mechanic, but they don't know how to make it better because they're not, they're just not creative. Is there a good way for somebody to give constructive criticism to a developer about that mechanic they don't like if they can't come up with other ways for it to be better? Like just trying to say it's not fun, and because it's not fun because it's laggy or whatever, does that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, definitely. If somebody says they don't like something but don't necessarily have an alternative or something else to say, sometimes mechanics are just bad. It happens. You can go out and say this mechanic is bad. That's not necessarily toxic. It's just it's really about phrasing rather than what your opinion is.
Gotcha. Well, rock on. All right, Ryan. I think I'm going to leave it there then. I think we're hitting about the 45-minute mark at this point, so I think we're good to roll. So thank you for joining me. If I'm going to always leave it like this. If people have questions for Ryan, you can email me, adamc@trinityforcenetwork.com. I will relay them over to him because of the NDAs and whatnot. A lot of these times it's hard for people to answer questions. Plus, I don't want to put you on blast. I know you have a Twitter, but don't necessarily.
Don't worry about it. I'm super open about everything.
There we go. Then just go ahead and send us an email or send me an email, and I'll forward it on. And then if you have any questions, you have any things you want some information, advice, whatever, I'll hook you guys up. So Ryan, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it, and we'll see you. I'll see you guys in the next interview. Thanks so much for listening.